Always true.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to
be? Wikipedia. According to Wikipedia, is a multilingual web-based free content encyclopedia project supported by the Wikimedia Foundation and based on a model of openly editable content. The project launched in January 2001, but with its current reach of 1.4 billion individual devices accessing some 46 million articles in 300 languages every month, Wikipedia in today's digital age is already a powerful empire. One of the masterminds behind this digital source of knowledge is Jimmy Wales. Today, he is working on a new project, WikiTribune, a form of journalism he hopes will be a counterweight to both superficial information and fake news. Can this new platform replace traditional journalism as we know it? And with digital currencies and killer robots being part of today's world, what should humans expect from technology in the future? Jimmy Wales talks to Al Jazeera.
Jimmy Wales, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. You've already been the mastermind behind one digital revolution, Wikipedia, of course, that transformed the way that we seek and accumulate knowledge and information. You're now doing something potentially equally groundbreaking with the news business, WikiTribune, revolutionizing the way that we receive and process news. How's it going?
Going good. About a year ago, we did a crowdfunding campaign to get the initial resources to start the project, and we started publishing stories for the first time in late October of 2017, and now we're cranking along. I've got a small team of journalists and the tech staff, and we're basically working on the software, making it easier for people to participate, and to really try to build a whole new framework, really, for how journalists and community members can work together.
Was it fake news specifically that triggered this idea in your head? Was there a sort of particular moment when something happened and you said, no, this is not okay?
Yeah, there really was. I mean, I had been thinking about the idea for quite a long time. Actually, when we started working on the project, I realized I had reserved the domain name 5 years ago. So I've been thinking about it for that long. But what really provoked me was, you know, the sense during the last U.S. election, all the talk about fake news, about post-truth world, and those kinds of things. And I remember, you know, I was in Davos, and somebody convinced me. They said, "Look, you've got to give the president 100 days. It's an American tradition, 100 days to see what he does." And I thought, all right, you know, let's just see. We've just had the election. He was just being sworn into office, and it was the very next day when Kellyanne Conway said something about alternative facts about this dispute about how many people were at the inauguration. Yes, and I was just like, yeah, you know what, 100 days is up. Like, this is not acceptable behavior. Like, facts do matter, and in particular, something like that is just a very simple statement that to lie about it when there's photographic evidence and so on is just outrageous. And so anyway, for me, it wasn't just that, but that was kind of the last straw. That was the thing that made me say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do this now.
It's not a brand new concept, is it, fake news? It's been around a long time, more perhaps in the past in the realms of sort of conspiracy theory, the moon landing, JFK, all that. But it has now really made its way into the mainstream narrative. How dangerous do you feel fake news is?
Well, I think it is quite dangerous, but I think we can. The term fake news has so many different possible meanings. From at one end of the spectrum, stories about teenagers creating fake websites just to try to get some quick ad money. That is a real thing. It's a real problem. All the way to Donald Trump uses the term to mean news he doesn't like or doesn't agree with. But I think if we really step back and say, okay, well, let's avoid that term for a moment and look at a lot of the problems facing journalism as a profession, the news industry, it's a serious problem, and it's a problem not only at the sort of national, sort of our understanding of the world globally, but really at the local level. The decline of local newspapers has been really devastating, and it's something that I think everybody should be concerned about, and we should all be thinking about, how do we fix this?
So tell us more about how WikiTribune actually works. It's a similar sort of crowdsourced model to Wikipedia, isn't it? Yeah. The wisdom of the crowds bearing upon the news model. Give us a better sense of how it actually works.
Sure, yeah. So the idea of WikiTribune is to say, let's replicate and let's build a healthy, strong community, much like the community that creates Wikipedia. So it's not wide open to everyone. We want people who are thoughtful and kind and interested in contributing in a positive way. And I want that community to work side by side with the paid professional journalists as equals. And so that's really unusual, the idea of saying, let's actually empower that community. They can make decisions, they can actually do things, but at the same time they're going to be backed up by professional journalists who can do things like, drop everything to pursue a story for 4 days, things that citizen journalists find harder to do. And basically we're a pilot project right now. We're really exploring a lot of different ideas to think about how can the community best contribute, how do they want to contribute, what are the things that only the professional journalists can do, and how can we think about that? And it's fun. We're cranking away every day.
So it's not just about empowering citizen journalism, it is also about recognizing that there is a place and a value for professional journalists and that sort of wisdom as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the funny thing is what people can't do from home and what journalists think may not always map together. A lot of journalists seem to think they're the only ones who can understand the world and explain it to people. That's not true at all. But they may be, the people who can get access, the people who can partly understand the world and explain it all, but also things like interview skills. There's a lot of very specific skills around journalism that not everyone will have, even though there are a lot of people out there who can do all kinds of interesting desk research and things like that. So anyway, I see real opportunities in that collaboration.
Can you give us an example of, a sort of story, a type of event in which WikiTribune comes into its own, in which WikiTribune works and therefore in practice how it works?
So Trump, they did the big tax cut. Corporate tax rates were slashed in the U.S. A really important story, but on the day of, most of the news about it was very superficial, very, not very insightful.
As news often tends to be.
Yeah, and also quite opinionated, but opinion without a lot of analysis. I just wanted to know what is actually in this law, right? I'm an American living in London, so my taxes are incredibly complicated. How is it going to impact me, and what is it actually in there? And that was hard to find. Now, I just saw cover of a newspaper today has done looks like a fantastic piece sort of explaining what it's all about. But that's the kind of thing that you can see how a community can do a very good job of actually getting people who are, real experts in the field to come in and help.
Do you foresee a moment in time when WikiTribune becomes, rather like Wikipedia, a first stop, perhaps a one-stop resource for people who are interested in the news, in what's happening today, what it means, and they just go into your website and they'll get everything they need without any further need to track traditional media or any other source?
I don't know. That sounds very difficult, simply because, I think that the traditional media and the traditional methods of doing things do work incredibly well for certain types of things. I think our strength will be more along the slow news, the more reflective news. And so I do think we can become a bit of a place where people say, all right, everybody's always going on and on about Brexit. The truth is, for this aspect of Brexit, I don't really understand it, so I'm going to go to WikiTribune and read their explainer.
Let's talk about the decline of local news. That's an issue you're interested in, because it's not just here about reaching for objective truths in big world-changing events. It's also about looking into small corners of the world where local journalists used to do the digging aren't anymore because the model has fallen apart, the advertising is gone, and you can perhaps once again fill that gap.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in the problem of local journalism. The number of journalists left to keep an eye on the piggy bank, so to speak, right, to keep an eye on what's going on, is so small now that we run a real risk of seeing a lot of local corruption, a lot of bad things happen when nobody's paying attention. So I think this is a fundamental problem that we need to really focus a lot of attention on trying to solve. And my thinking here, and we're not yet doing local at WikiTribune, it's something we want to try as soon as we can, is that around local journalism, that's where this community model can really come into play. That there are people, local people, who are very passionate about their local communities. If we can get, say, the local fans of the local high school football league, if they can all work together to report what's happening and then we don't have to pay people to do that, then hey, the journalists we can hire, okay, we'll put them to work checking out, you know, the mayor's bank account. I'm not sure if we can do it or not, but I'm going to try. I think it's really interesting and worth a stab anyway.
Now, you've got your critics, you'll acknowledge that. People who say that you're reinventing the wheel, people who say that traditional media, whilst embattled, is not in fact broken, as you have said that it is, that there is still a very healthy stream of fact-based reporting that holds Trump's feet to the fire every day, that has brought down Jacob Zuma in South Africa and his cronies, that exposes injustices in places like Myanmar. Have you lost faith in the traditional media?
No, I haven't. I've actually been very pleased to see a few of the trends in recent times. So, you know, one of the biggest and most important trends I've seen is the New York Times, their digital subscriptions have skyrocketed from something like 1 million to well over 2 million. That's really important, and that's a signal that the public does still care about real journalism. And you know, I want to see a lot more of that. And you know, it is amazing how many of the news services out there are doing real journalism, even in the face of a business model that is sending them all the signals in the world of like, yeah, you've just paid a senior reporter for 3 weeks to do this story. You would have made just as much money by hiring some millennials who've got a good sense of humor, writing some viral content. And they're, you know, in the face of that, they're still saying, no, we're going to do serious journalism. We have to figure out the business model to make that happen. And I think that's fantastic. But I think most people in the industry would agree, wow, it's been embattled. And certainly for aspects of it, it's been effectively destroyed. And I think that's something that does bother people.
I want to talk to you about the ability of WikiTribune to self-censor and ensure its own accuracy, which of course is fundamental in combating or refuting fake news claims. And the one question I would have is, as a sort of open source or crowdsource online community-based project, isn't it infinitely open to subversion, to the hijacking of the likes of the troll communities and so on, who can just jump on and do what they've done on Facebook and on Twitter?
Yeah, so you
in
really,
a way that they can't as easily subvert traditional media.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really have to be very focused on that as a potential problem, but you can't let that stand in the way of trying to empower genuinely good people to participate and do things of quality. So we know at Wikipedia, of course, people get banned from Wikipedia every single day for coming on and trolling and doing something. But the result is they do get banned every single day, and you can't say that necessarily of some of the other platforms where they tolerate incredibly bad behavior because they consider themselves to be really open platforms. Whereas Wikipedia has always said, this isn't an open free speech zone, this is a project to build an encyclopedia. So similarly for us, I mean, we have to have very strong community rules. We have to say to people certain behaviors are absolutely not welcome here. If you want to, you know, go and sort of troll and rant, the whole internet's open to you. Like, there's lots of places. We're not stopping you from doing that, but don't do it here. We've actually been very happy so far with the, you know, we have every story that's posted has a talk page, so you can go and comment. But we've really encouraged people with a lot of messaging, and our existing core community really understands this. This isn't like other news sites where the point is just discuss the news, give your opinion about what Trump did today or whatever. It's always supposed to be about how can we improve this article? What can we do to make this better? What should the next article be? What are the questions left unanswered? What are the things we need to be thinking about and working on? And that's actually been very successful. People have been very good about saying, okay, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about here. And I think that's really important, that we keep that kind of an attitude as we grow. Because otherwise, yeah, if you just say, yeah, it's radical free speech zone. I mean, one of the things that a lot of news sites did a few years back, and I think most of them have pulled back because they realized it was a mistake, is they really prioritized as a metric the number of comments they had. That was a measure of reader engagement or people commenting on what we're writing. Turns out
Half of them were written by robots.
Yeah, written by robots, or it's just the worst people in humanity screaming at each other, screaming at the journal. It wasn't really adding value. You know, everybody's heard the expression, just don't read the comments, right? Because you read the news story and at the bottom you're like, who are these idiots down here? Well, okay, so now news sites are understanding it. That's not actually, like, prioritizing number of comments can be very unhealthy because they're not helpful people, really.
Well, I want to ask you the same sort of question about Wikipedia, about that self-correction of the crowds. I mean, Wikipedia, what is it, the 5th most visited website in the world. It's known to just about everybody who has access to the internet.
Yes.
It influences politicians, journalists, policy makers the world over. Who guards the accuracy of Wikipedia? I mean, who's accountable? Are you accountable for that?
So what's interesting about Wikipedia is you really have to understand the community. It's a very healthy community, a strong community of people who are very passionate about getting it right, who supervise everything, who become admins and block people who are trolling and vandalizing. But it's really it's about chewing on the ideas. It's about an open, continuous dialogue. How do we improve? How do we get better? What have we gotten wrong? Who screwed up what? How do we fix it? And all that. So it's a big and noisy process, obviously imperfect. Everybody's seen a news story about a mistake in Wikipedia or something like this. But it really is about having a community of people who care. That's a very human, values-oriented sort of thing. It's not a magical software solution. And I don't think it's fragile. We've been going for quite a long time, but I do think it requires a certain amount of nurturing, a certain amount of reminding ourselves always, hey, we're here for a real purpose, not to sort of enable trolling and nonsense, really.
How involved are you still, day to day, with Wikipedia?
I'm pretty involved. I mean, I'm active in the community. I do a lot of public speaking. That takes up a lot of my time. The past year or so, I've been really focused on WikiTribune, so obviously I'm spending more time on that. I'm on the board of the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the charity that I set up that owns Wikipedia. So it all keeps me very busy.
You've got to obviously have, I mean, a sort of deep, innate faith in the idea of the wisdom of crowds, in the goodness of people. You said you're an eternal optimist. I mean, to some people that might strike them as naive, given how easily corruptible the internet has become, all these sort of dark spaces and all the nasties involved there. I mean, how do you maintain that sense of optimism?
Well, I mean, I think maybe it is a bit naive, but I hope not insanely so. I mean, Wikipedia has proven largely that there are a lot of nice people out there, and they just want to help out and do something useful. And I think we can't be silly and ignore potential problems. You have to sort of think about them and realistically defend against attacks and things like that. But the existence of, dark places on the internet doesn't disprove the existence of places of great light and joy. So it's sort of like, we're sitting here in London. Somewhere in London right now, something really horrible is happening with bad people are doing something. And there's also wonderful homes and families and loving environments and so forth. And that's all that mess is the human condition. And what we have to think about is how do we get the better side of things? How do we make sure that stays empowered and that's important, and that these problems remain anomalies, and also that we try to address them and try to help the people who are in need in those disastrous situations, whatever they may be. That's a bit naive maybe, but I don't know what else we can do.
What scares you about the internet, about its potential and where it's going?
I'd say one of the things that I worry a lot about is the rise of censorship, the rise of the ability of countries to block political information they don't like. I think that is troubling, and it's a multifaceted problem. It's moving beyond simply a basic sort of, block the website you don't agree with, into troll armies and things like that to silence opposition by flooding zones with nonsense and so on. That's troublesome. It's something I think we need to think a lot about, and obviously everybody is thinking a lot about it these days, a lot of focus on that sort of thing. But so that's one thing.
What inspires you about it?
What inspires me about the internet and the internet community is just the sheer number of perfectly nice people that there are out there. It's easy to forget sometimes that people are really lovely. I always give an example that has nothing to do with my work. There's on Reddit, which is a place that has very dark alleys and dark places, but also there's the personal finance subreddit, where a typical post is someone who's 19 says, "Oh dear, my alcoholic father just passed away, and I found out he had taken out credit cards in my name, and I have $30,000 in debt. I don't know what to do. I'm a young person." And then people, like, they weigh in with like really good advice, and they say, "Oh, like, you didn't say what state you're in, but in California you call this office, and here's how you deal with it, and here's the notification." Wow, like, these are just nice people helping out someone on the internet. I mean, that's the spirit that reminds me of the early, like, happy days of the internet, and so that's inspirational to me.
Do you believe in killer robots?
I've always joked that, you know, when the killer robots come, you'll have me to thank for their fine knowledge of Elizabethan poetry, because the killer robots will have read Wikipedia. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I mean, speaking incredibly literally, I do think that we're going to see the rise of automated killing robots, machines in warfare, and I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later. I know there's been some discussion maybe these should be banned before they get started under the Geneva Convention type of situation, but I think that the cost of building such things continues to decline, and there's nothing to be done about that. That's just part of technological progress, and that there will be something like this, and if maybe it's not sanctioned by the major important countries, that, yeah, it's like a Black Mirror episode, but I think that's coming. So actual killer robots. As people have a broader fear about the future of technology and what does it mean for humankind, there I do remain very optimistic. I mean, I think we've really got an amazing future ahead. So,
do you think blockchain is going to change the world?
So blockchain, I'm cautiously skeptical of blockchain, simply because there's so much hype right now. There's so much noise, so much nonsense being peddled that's clearly nonsense. At the same time, I have to say, when I first learned about blockchain and really studied it enough to really get the concept, it's genius. It's a genius idea. What applications it may have, I think, are still mostly to be determined. Clearly, there's the application of cryptocurrencies. What application do cryptocurrencies have? That's still a largely open question. There's all kinds of interesting things out there, but it's sort of, there's so much noise and so much nonsense, it's really hard to get at things that actually I feel like are really meaningful and going to have a big impact.
Are you a Bitcoin investor?
I'm not a Bitcoin investor. People have given Bitcoin and Ethereum to support WikiTribune, and because it's done nothing but go straight up, we made some money off of that, because before I had time to sell it, it went up. And we thought about it. Sometimes when people have donated Bitcoin, they say, "Oh, I hope you'll keep it in Bitcoin," and obviously you have to pay journalists, but they can't really accept Bitcoin to pay the rent or whatever, but maybe only sell it when you have to. But we sort of thought, no, actually our objective is to be neutral in our reporting, and if we had a big pile of Bitcoin, we might become boosters of Bitcoin, and that's not really serving even the people who are donating Bitcoin. What they want is quality journalism about Bitcoin. So I think we'll just continue to sell as it comes in. I don't know.
To wrap up, Wikipedia has sites in 300 languages, 46 million articles accessed by 1.4 billion individual devices every month. How often do you sit back, as I imagine you must, and reflect on the enormity of this thing that you created back in what must have seemed like the dark days of the digital world in 2001?
Yeah, I mean, fairly often. I mean, occasionally something will happen that reminds me of how incredibly global our impact is. So one of the things I'm very interested in on a personal level is education in the developing world, and thinking about how can technology help in that area. And when I meet students, a while back I met some students in a slum, like a terrible area in the Dominican Republic, and they had a computer center that had just been built, and they all had mobile devices, even though it was a very poor area, and they all knew Wikipedia, of course. And I thought, wow, because they told me 5 years prior to this there was no electricity in the area, and you know, that's remarkable to think about, that people who formerly would have almost no access to information have the world's knowledge in their pocket. That's an amazing thing, and it's wow, it's cool.
Jimmy Wales, once again, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Yeah, super, great.